don't have Tuesday.
No,
No,
both days.
no, you can't. Dean wouldn't like that
No,
either.
Dean will be confused.
No. So if Dean's in there, turn this off. And hi, Rita. It's 1987 too, isn't it? In June 1987.
Yep.
I bet if they can understand this, they're a better man than I, Gunga Din. End of I Din. That'll do.
The Faster Than Light Radio Show.
Hi and welcome once again to the show. Thanks for joining us. This week on the Faster Than Light Radio Show, a look at a book by a man by the name of, a biography of a man by the name of Klaus Fuchs, The Man Who Stole the Atom Bomb, written by Norman Ross, available by Grafton, the hardcover imprint in this particular occasion of Grafton, the William Collins distributed imprint around town. It's a book that disturbed me somewhat, and I think it will be of interest to most listeners to this show, although it's obviously non-fiction, dealing with a man who is still alive, an important part of the history of post-World War II in the Western world. Yes, more about that a little anon. Also a look at some new science fiction and a look at new news, and there's even a video review of a film that's going out to the shelves of video stores around town this week. More about that anon as well. Last week I held over from Locus a number of items, although I gave you the information that was the cover items, which is the Nebula Award winners and the Hugo Award nominations, at least in the novel category. I may come back to those the nominations for other categories for the Hugo in a little while, but I did pass over on the obituary page a number of eulogies to Terry Carr. My scanning of the page when the issue came in the post was the fact that, oh yes, here's the obituaries, yes, look at that. Most of it's got to do with, as I would expect, Terry Carr, who I announced 5 or 6 weeks ago, his death here on the Faster Than Light radio show. It's the eulogies are from a whole variety of people that knew him and worked with him, and they're really quite lovingly crafted by a whole group of people that could write well, and Terry, being an editor, got to know most of them as, first of all, as fans, because he was highly involved in the fan circle, and then obviously he knew a lot of them in his professional capacity as an editor at Ace Books. It's a pity he's gone. What I failed to notice on the obituary page was a little box towards the bottom, and thank you, Jonathan, for pointing it out to me. I may have missed it again this week as well. There's a late bulletin in this issue of Locus that says on May the 19th, in the United States, Alice Sheldon, also known as James Tiptree Jr., died of self-inflicted gunshot wounds after killing her aged husband. And Charles adds details are in the next issue. It is a very disturbing piece of news. Disturbing because that means there is, from a selfish point of view, no more James Tiptree Jr. to be had in terms of writing, and also for what would appear to be the situation in which Alice Sheldon has died. For those of you who are familiar with Paddy Perrett's book on science fiction authors in their own lounge rooms and garages, a wonderful book of photo essays, photos giving an idea of the science fiction writer and attempting to capture the science fiction writer in the process of their own surroundings and in the process of creating for a number of them. There's also a little pen sketch with each photograph where the authors talk about themselves. That's the only information I've ever seen, or at least photographic information I've ever seen of Alice Sheldon. She looked quite old at the time the picture was taken. I think she was in about 68 or 69, which would put her in the early 70s now that she is dead. It strikes me that there was still a good writing life left in Alice Sheldon, and she was creating some of her best fiction at the time of her death. By the way, there is more work from Alice Sheldon announced, and not too far away, under the name of James Tiptree Jr. That's one of the sort of crazinesses of science fiction publishing, and of publishing in general, that an author can die, and yet for 18 months we can still see original work that was in the pipeline coming out. In the case of Phil Dick, who I've been commenting on here on the show in the last month or so, there's much of his work coming out a number of years after his death, simply because there was so much unpublished material in his own lifetime. Talking of people and publishing, on a happier note you might say, R.A. McAvoy, someone who's gained a lot of fame and fortune through her publications for Bantam, starting off with Tea with the Black Dragon, and subsequently a whole group of books. She had some 15 novels written at the time she sold her first, so it's not surprising there's more coming out. She sold another 2 to Bantam, The Third Eagle and Journeyman, and at the moment she's finishing a mystery thriller called Lame Brain, which is still on spec, that is, it hasn't found a home. Kim Stanley Robinson has sold The Gold Coast. It's a companion piece, but not a sequel, so he says, to The Wild Shore. It's been sold in the United States to Tor. Harlan Ellison evidently reports there's a new battery of tests and a new cadre of medicos has at last decided what it is that he's suffering from. At last a name for his disease. He says it's an idiopathic complaint called chronic Epstein-Barr virus. So there you go. The virus is still controversial. Some doctors don't believe in it. It strikes me as being like magic these days, doesn't it? Medical doctors who don't believe in a particular virus. But it is getting increasing attention since it often affects high achievers. Some in the media have dubbed it the yuppie disease. Wouldn't Harlan love to be knowing that he has a yuppie disease? Great stuff. Orson Scott Card, the man who's won this year's Nebula and is on the shortlist, the nomination form for the Best Novel category, and I notice as well that he's in the Best Novelette category for this year's Hugo nominations, has sold not 1 but 5 new books in an SF series to Tor in the United States. It appears Tor is doing some of the better buying at the moment. And if you're interested in The Handmaid's Tale, which did so well in England last year and is on the Booker shortlist, you might be interested to know that Margaret Atwood, the writer of the book, only available in hardcover around town at the moment, has won the first Arthur C. Clarke Award for the best science fiction book published in England in the previous year. So for works published in 1986, she's won the Arthur C. Clarke Award this year. The award includes a £1,000 grant. That's about $2,500 Australian at the moment. It was announced at British Eastercon that she'd won it, and she's going to be presented with the cheque and the prize on June the 11th, which means that she was presented with it quite recently during her next trip to England. And some other disturbing news, along with the fact that Alice Sheldon has died, has killed herself. Marion Zimmer Bradley suffered another stroke. She's had a succession of strokes in recent years. On May the 8th, she was hospitalised in Alta Bates in Berkeley, California. She's expected to recover completely, but her speech has been affected for the time being, and she's had to cancel all convention appearances and lectures for the foreseeable future. Marion Zimmer Bradley, you might remember, had a stroke last year, and she'd had an earlier stroke in 1980. It strikes me that her body is telling her it's time to slow down, and yet she's probably at one of the most productive stages in her writing career. At the time of her stroke, she was proofing the copy-edited manuscript of The Firebrand. It's her multi-million-dollar contract novel for Simon & Schuster, and the book's due out in the US in November. Talking of multi-million-dollar contracts, there was a short note in this latest issue of Locus that Arthur C. Clarke has turned in, out of the blue, a new manuscript in the US to Del Rey. It's a complete manuscript for 2061 titled Odyssey 3. It's an interim novel in the Odyssey series that, of course, started with 2001. Clarke owes Del Rey the end book in the series, which is titled 20,001, The Final Odyssey, and he's got a $1 advance on that, but he's refused to write it until the next Galileo flyby. Del Rey did not accept the new book as fulfilling that contract. That's the contract for 20,001. Instead, being good publishers, they rushed a new contract through in post-haste time, 24 hours, a Random House record evidently for them to do such a thing, they being the parent company, and they gave Arthur his usual advance at the moment, that is $1 on the signing of the contract. It isn't that Arthur's as destitute as all this money seems to make it sound. The complete advance payment will be $1,375,001 US once the copy-edited manuscript is approved. So it looks like Arthur C. Clarke will be continuing to support his favourite causes in Sri Lanka and elsewhere around the world, albeit giving away prizes. When you're making that sort of money, you need some sort of tax shelter to put it all into. We'll be back in just a moment.
Paperback writer.
Yes, indeed. Good reads that are out there and stuff you can buy on the newsstands. I am meaning to run more of the Hugo nomination categories, and I thought I might discuss the best novelette The best novella and the best novelette categories, both of them are the longish shorter fiction. Now, they're done on word counts, up to 20,000, up to 40,000, I think is the limiting case. Over 40,000 and we're dealing with a novel. The best novella category and the best novelette category are often first published in the science fiction digests, and that's the case this year as it has been in previous years. Although I do notice a creeping tendency for some original work these days in the shorter categories to be coming to us from anthologies. The Best Novella category is almost blanketed by Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. 4 of the 5 nominated titles were first published there. Only one of them, Eifelheim by Michael Flynn, was first published in Analog, the November 86 issue. The others, Kim Stanley Robinson's Escape from Kathmandu, Robert Silverberg's Gilgamesh in the Outback, great Australian title, Lucius Shepard's R&R, which won the Best Novella category in the Nebula Awards this year, and Connie Willis's Spice Pogrom have all been first published in Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine through 1986. When you take a look at the even shorter length Best Novelette category, then in fact Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine only appears once. Orson Scott Card's Hat-Rack River has been nominated for the Best Novelette category. Other authors that you'll be familiar with, Roger Zelazny's once again amongst the nominations in the Best Novelette category for Permafrost, a work first published back in April in Omni last year. Werner Vinge is in there from Analog magazine with The Barbarian Princess, as is David Brin with a new short work, Thor Meets Captain America, another great title, first published last July in Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. And the final of the 5 works nominated is William Gibson. Yet again, he seems to be all over the place these days. Like Orson Scott Card, he has a novel in the Hugo nominations this year. The shorter work in the Best Novelette category is called The Winter Market. It was first published in Interzone in the UK, the Spring 86 issue, and was also picked up in a magazine in the US called Stardate. Sadly lamented the work that was being edited and put together earlier in 1986 and only lasted some 4 or 5 issues. So okay, those categories, which are the works originally appearing in digests, lead me to talk about the state of digests on the newsstands here in Western Australia. If you're someone who regularly buys your science fiction from the newsagent, you will have noticed that of late all the titles have been disappearing. There's good reason for this. The digests that we uniformly were buying for around the $3 to $4 mark only 2 years ago have started to sail up around the $8 and $9 mark, and gotchas were just not getting the sales. So most of them have been cancelled, that is, to buy in quantity, unless you put an order in at your newsagent for Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine, for the magazine of science fiction and fantasy, or for Analog. Don't expect to see them just appearing in your newsagent as they have been nearly every year from 1955 through to now. Earlier this year, in fact some 2 months ago, the policy was changed with bringing in quantities of these magazines because the return rate was so high, because the cover price is so high. So unless you ask, your newsagent is not likely to have digests. If they're what you wish to read, can I suggest that probably the best way to acquire digests is to subscribe directly from the US. I know a number of you don't like this because there's been a habit from US publishers in recent years to put the mailing label, to glue it straight onto the cover of the magazine, put a wrapper around it and just mail it off to Australia. A lot of you don't like the idea of having labels stuck across your covers, and I don't blame you. However, maybe we could have a concerted effort to put in a subscription and ask them to mail in a mailer rather than to stick the label to the outside of the magazine. Who knows, if enough people ask, it may well happen. But certainly it's the cheapest way to acquire digests from the US, with the 40 to 60% offerings off the newsstand price that these publishers regularly offer to any subscriber, whether they be in the US or elsewhere in the world. You can end up buying American digests for around about the $3 mark still on subscription. And with Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine now under the editorship of Gardner Dozois and publishing some of the best science fiction in the field, why don't you go out and purchase that if there's one digest you want to have in your mailbox? I take that as a reminder to myself because we at Murdoch, it's the one digest we aren't subscribing to at the moment. You can see the others out here, however. One other short note, I was mentioning the last couple of weeks about Phil Dick's work, his original work, which has been coming out, limping out from Picador and other publishers, the works that were available in the 1960s to publishers but no one wanted to take up. Now he's a famous dead author. Of course, his work is coming out, it seems every other month there is almost a new Dick novel coming out in original paperback or in some hardcover edition. But there is his classic works of science fiction, and some of this is stuff that you really should not ignore, that is being constantly repackaged. One such work, available from Grafton this month, is Galactic Pot Healer. It's a wonderful work of Dick's from the mid-60s, and it is well worth having in your collection. If you've never read it, then can I suggest that you do pick it up and have a look at it. The work was first published in '69, although I think the work that went into writing it was in the '68-'69 period, as is often the case. The book deals with a whole variety of things. It is, as all Dick's works are, a comment on contemporary society through a science-fictional satire eyes. There's a whole lot of other things at it as well. You will love the idea, though, of one of the characters in this book. Those of you who are stationed at home without a normal means of support, apart from the Australian government, of this character galloping off to the supermarket, as he seems to do quite regularly, for the simple reason that once he gets his doll check, unless he spends it immediately, inflation wipes out all the purchasing power of his doll. It might seem an economic nightmare, but I assure you there are countries in the world where, since the 1960s, this has become a reality. Witness Israel a couple of years ago, or Argentina a few years ago, where inflation rate was running at 1,000% or so a year. Can't live with that, can you? In Australia, we haven't been blessed with such problems. However, we've got our own social welfare nightmare at the moment, you might say. This book has shed some interesting light on that. Galactic Pot Healer, a 60s work of Phil Dick's, once again in print. It's going to cost you around about the $8 mark as a price of entry this time round. As a number of people say, he's possibly one of the world's greatest science fiction writers. I certainly enjoy his writing. Well, let's take a break, have a listen to some music, and here's Robert with some more of his Flying Silver Machine.
Robert's Turning away from our view of Galaxy 28948, we prepare the Silver Machine for a space chase, across the various forms of space consciousness and preparing ourselves for a vast and dangerous journey. By Hawkwind, from 1980's album Levitation, the instrumental Space Chase.
Supernova Books, 135 William Street, near Wellington Street, have a wide range of science fiction and fantasy books. Fantasy art also available. Program sponsor Supernova Books, open every day, including Thursday night, all day Saturday, and from 12 noon Sunday.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Faster Than Light radio show. If my voice is unfamiliar to you, that's because I'm unfamiliar to you. My name is Harry Harrison. I'm a science fiction writer.
Science fiction.
Indeed, the wonderful film theme from the Faster Than Light radio show. Videotapes on the small screen rather than the large screen for you this week. CBS Fox are releasing out to the video stores around town this week a series of films that were originally produced for television by the Australian Children's Television Foundation. The whole series was called The Winners, and you may remember mentioning them on the show because Penguin paperbacked all of the scripts under separate paperbacks, and you could buy them, and they were quite successful teen novels. They're still available and they're still in print. There was one science fictional work, a script by Bob Ellis, called Quest Beyond Time. When they were first released on television, this is an episode I missed, although I saw a number of the others. Particularly impressed by Top Kid. It was not a science fictional work, but it's the one that creamed a whole lot of awards from the Winners series. Did very well in New York, did very well here in Australia. It stars a guy called M.L. Minty, who you might remember was in Mad Max 2. Well, it goes back a way. Also Gary McDonald's in it, Picnic at Hanging Rock, Molly, you name it. He's well known for a number of other roles that he's taken on, particularly Norman Gunston. Anyway, Top Kid, top cast, top film. The science fictional work for the series, Quest Beyond Time, is a little different. The level of acting, particularly from the juveniles, I found wanting. However, the script has some interesting science fictional ideas. Yes, they are cardboard. Yes, we've seen them before, but they're put together in some rather interesting ways.
Vikings. What if the Vikings second guess us and come to the forest?
They'll never do that. They're afraid of the forest people.
Forest people?
Cannibals. They eat anyone they catch in there. Stupid Vikings are terrified of them.
Out! Out before the sun sets! Death if you do that. Death! 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 All around, brothers and sisters. Death! Death! Death!
I thought you slew all who came in here.
No Marit! Marit fought for Covenant! Marit has start till sundown! Then eat! For what do we say, Sister Marit? But that all meat is black in the dark.
Indeed it is. Well, that sound gives you an idea of the quality of some of the acting and some of the sound in the film. The girl, played here by Rebecca Rigg, is of the clan Murray. This clan has fought a war not too many years in the past, which has enabled all the humans left after what we come to find out is a nuclear disaster in our far future here in Australia. These clans have fought a war and they have made a pact so that all humans, in one sense, have a covenant with each other. They have a covenant against others, however, and there are others in the movie. The movie's a pistache of a whole lot of things. We've got a little bit of cannibalism here and jungle people. We've got midgets that manage to make swords and run around in samurai costumes. And we've got a lead boy, by the name, played here by Daniel Cordeau, who is a hang glider sucked through a time walk into the far future. Why, you say, should this happen?
The coin is new. The gods have sent him from before. You are from 1979?
1985. I mean, it's 1985 now.
Here, now. The year is 2457. In your time, there was the war. It was fought with weapons that destroyed cities. Weapons that burned from the sky like beams of light. Some survived. Some altered. You've seen the Wanderers.
Mutants.
The word is not used. Wanderers live inside the Covenant, but outside the clans.
This sickness, that's killing your people,
We all have it. Yes, my daughter also. Without your help, we'll all die.
I'm no doctor.
Did the gods not tell you when they brought you from before? You can fly. Off the coast to the south there is an island. On it there are wise people, followers of the hanged god. Could you fly to the island with her?
If there are cliffs, if the winds are right, if it's not too far, maybe.
These people collect the old wisdom. They could look at her blood and give you the cure.
How would I get there? There's lions out there, there's monsters.
Fergus and Katrin would get you there by the inland route. That's safer.
Forget it. Why should I stick my neck out? I'm not the hero type.
I claim his culling. Man's years, yet not a man.
He has eaten our bread. He has guessed right.
So there you have it, in Bob Ellis's vision of the future of Australia in Quest Beyond Time, a newly released video. There isn't McDonald's, but if you do happen to share a hamburger in someone's hovel, you're in like Flynn. Well, apart from the juvenile acting, which I found lacking a little in Quest Beyond Time, this is well worth taking a look at. Very good production values, well-made film, some very good sound effects and some good special effects as well. The cardboard that is pushed around here, for those of you that regularly read science fiction and fantasy, is familiar and somewhat enjoyable. Quest Beyond Time, one of the winners package, out and available in video stores around town this week. And finally, the book I alluded to at the beginning of the program, Klaus Fuchs, The Man Who Stole the Atom Bomb. Not a work of science fiction and fantasy, but a work of fact. It is a very thoroughgoing biography by Norman Ross of the man who was originally in East Germany, grew up in Germany, in fact astonished the world in 1949 when it was obvious that the Russians were able to make a nuclear bomb. They'd exploded one, quite like the Americans, it turned out. This man, Klaus Fuchs, born in Germany, a brilliant student who fled from the Nazis. He worked at the University of Bristol and then took up a post at the University of Edinburgh. In 1939, because he was German, was interned as an enemy alien, released to the US, where he worked at in Canada first of all, and then finally at Las Alamos on the nuclear bomb. When Hitler attacked Russia, Fuchs decided to spy for the Russians. The Russians, I must admit, in the Second World War were our allies. From then on, he provided them with wide and vital information that enabled them to move rapidly ahead in their own research on the atomic bomb. He was arrested in 1949 in London, sentenced to 14 years imprisonment, and eventually went to live in East Germany, where he took up a life again as a nuclear physicist. You might consider this a strange story to be telling you about, but the bomb has influenced all our lives post the Second World War, and this man, the son of a priest in Germany, with a great moral conscience of his own, decided why should any one people have the rights to this power. And when we are considering on the international scale these days détente, standoff tactics and the nuclear deterrent, it's because of this man the nuclear bomb is a deterrent to both sides. I'll leave you to make up your own evaluation of this biography. I found it compelling reading. Norman Ross, Klaus Fuchs, The Man Who Stole the Atom Bomb, available only in hardcover, maybe something you'll need to ask your library for, and selling for around the $39 mark around town. Good material. That's all for this week, until next week when once again we talk about science fiction and fantasy, and I hope I have your ears. Bye for now. You've been listening to the Faster Than Light radio show, produced and recorded in the audio studios of Murdoch University for 6UBS FM.